A veteran NDP MP is facing questions over expenses related to a Christmas holiday. A CBC News investigation found that Niki Ashton took a $17,000 trip to Quebec City in 2022. She brought along her husband and 2 children, all on taxpayers' dime. CBC's JP Tasker broke this story, and he joins me now. Okay, what more can you tell us about this trip, JP?
Yeah, just to recap, Niki Ashton took her family of 4, her partner and her 2 kids, to Quebec City and Montreal over the Christmas period in December 2022. And as you say, she billed the taxpayers for $17,000. That's what was associated with this trip, including flights, accommodations, incidentals, and meals.
JP, I'm just going to stop you for a second. I don't think your microphone's turned on.
Oh.
Yeah, I think you're wearing it, but I think I'm going to just get up and go around to the back and turn this thing on. Does that work? Or hang on, here it is. Here we go. Here we go. Sorry, folks. It's a new studio and a new renovation. It's like buying a new house. You got to figure out where the light switches are.
You're a jack of all trades.
So let's back up so the audience can hear your work. Tell us about the trip.
Yeah. So Niki Ashton took her husband and her 2 kids to Quebec City and Montreal over the Christmas period in December 2022. That was a trip that cost the taxpayers $17,000, including flights, accommodations, incidentals, and it's raising eyebrows because this is an MP who's rarely on Parliament Hill. She has been zooming into most of the parliamentary proceedings since the pandemic, and that is perfectly within the rules. They did change the rules to allow people to join virtually, and she has been taking advantage of that new rule. And that's why this trip is a little puzzling for some people, because she was not here for most of the fall sittings. She came just once for 4 days. She was not here when Parliament wrapped up for the Christmas period, but flew into Ottawa 5 days after Parliament wrapped, was here for a few days, went on to Quebec City and Montreal. We've seen social media posts that show they were enjoying a lot of winter activities in Quebec City. There was some snow tubing, there was some sliding, there was some skating. They took in the German Christmas market. You can see there, that's the sliding behind the Chateau Frontenac in the old city center there. But Niki Ashton telling us today that it wasn't just for pleasure, that she was there also on parliamentary business, that she was meeting with people around the issues of linguistics and the French language. She wanted to learn more about the place of French in Quebec and in Canada. But it was, as I say, an expensive learning experience, $17,641.12 on this trip in total, including $13,000 on flights alone. David.
Okay, so the interesting thing on this is that Niki Ashton uses the virtual parliament quite a bit. She's very rarely you see her on Parliament Hill in Ottawa, and then the timing of this trip and taking the family. So she was in Ottawa today. She had a press conference this morning, and you were there. How was she reacting to this? Yeah,
we asked her a bunch of questions about this. In particular, who was she meeting with? She said she was meeting with linguistic experts. She wanted to learn more about French in Quebec. Okay, well, who were you speaking to? Can you give us the name of one person that you met with? Can you give us the name of a group that you might have met with? And she was not able to say those details publicly. Have a listen to what she did say.
I feel it's important that as anyone involved in official languages that we are engaging with people from Francophone communities across the country, and nowhere is more Francophone than Quebec and Quebec City.
So who did you meet with in Quebec City and Montreal on the issue of the French language?
I met with various people, and I just want to be clear that the rules of the House of Commons are very clear. You know, whether we meet as on constituency issues or critic areas, that's understood to be part of our work.
It seems like you're just dancing around this. Like, who did you meet with on your trip, and what did you discuss with them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm just going to go back and make very clear the House of Commons has rules on this, and I was there in my capacity as official languages critic.
So as you heard there, she would only say various people. She would not actually give us any names. The party did follow up afterwards to give a little more specificity, saying she met with the Quebec Black community on cultural issues, an author, and people involved in the union movement. But people are asking, was this worth the cost? Was this worth $17,000 to the taxpayers? Is this a appropriate use of parliamentary resources, especially when the government's trying to cut back on travel expenses?
Okay, JP, thanks so much. That's the CBC's JP Tasker. There were mixed opinions on Ashton's expense trips from her fellow MPs.
It seems like a really odd time of the year to be traveling for work.
I can only speak for myself, and I always try to follow the rules that are in place.
Unbelievable! Merry Christmas to Niki Ashton from the Canadian taxpayers.
Okay, there goes JP. The power panel was listening in and are with me on this. Andrew Thompson, Gary Keller, Caroline Verheyen, and Emily Nicola. You saw my first attempt at technical support there, Emily, as I had to fix a microphone. What do you make of this? You're not in Parliament a lot. I know it's tough to get here from Thompson, Manitoba. but then you take a trip Christmas time like this with the husband, the partner, and the 2 kids. Big deal? No deal? What do you think?
Sorry, the question's directed at me.
Yes, Emily. Thank you. Sorry.
So it is fishy. I do think that GP is right in asking questions. I also do think that it's worth for the NDP to give a clearer answer than this in terms of the actual list of names of people that have been met with. I wish for myself that the NDP and any opposition leader is taking the issue of official languages seriously and therefore are making those kind of trips, making those connections. But as someone, from Quebec City, who's worked in linguistics, I'm really curious to know which are the experts, who are the people that Niki Ashton has been meeting with. The question is so partisan in some way. Language rights in Quebec. And so if you're meeting from different MNAs, from different parties, if you're meeting with even different social linguistic experts, demographs, you're going to get a very, very different view of the issue. It's a very fraught issue. And just the way that she's been skating around the topic doesn't tell me that she's been meeting with a lot of people. Otherwise, had a sense of just how difficult that issue actually is from Quebec society. And so, the more details she's unable to get, the more questions that I have. And I'm more concerned about that, frankly, than about $17,000 in the grander scheme of the Canadian, budget. But I'm just concerned about, if you're the official opposition, official language critic, that job is indeed about meeting up with people. And so if you're spending time in Quebec and not actually meeting up with people that much, that's the question I have an issue with, regardless of how much money was paid or not for that trip.
Andrew, how do you see this one?
Well, Emily's being very generous, I think, on this. I think it doesn't look good. I mean, I don't doubt that it's within the rules. It's a bit like when the Conservative MPs were flying their wives out to the caucus meeting that just happened to be right next to their convention. I mean, all this stuff is probably, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, okay within the rules, but it just looks like a sense of entitlement, and people don't like that, and especially don't like that right now. And, the answer that she gave wasn't satisfactory, and I think the party clearly must know that and is going to have to either clean it up or figure out, a better way to address the concerns. But that just didn't pass muster today.
Gary, when you worked in government, was there a lot of stakeholder relations happening between, say, Christmas Day and New Year's Day?
Yeah, that's a great question. In my experience, between, say, December 20th and January 1st, the amount of parliamentary business that goes on is the square root of 0. And, $17,000, I did the math. That's 1,062 and a half $16 orange juices. If you remember the $16 orange juice.
You guys got to get over a Bev Oda. So, yeah.
Many years ago. But, just because something is technically within the rules doesn't mean you should actually claim it. And I think given that she's brought attention on herself by not coming to Ottawa very much. In fact, I've noticed that in the past. I watch Parliament probably more than the average person and noticed that both in question period, member statements, and in committee, she's almost all the time virtual. It raises more questions. And when you have expenditures like this, what it does is it, again, erodes trust in Parliament. And it may be one of these things that threatens the existence of hybrid parliament. Canadians are giving parliamentarians a lot of leeway with a hybrid parliament. And when you see things like this, they're going to say, maybe you should all come back to Ottawa. And so if parliamentarians want to save hybrid parliament, maybe they should look in their own backyards.
Carleen, how do you see this one? I mean, hybrid parliament, you can see its value as a thing when it's needed, but its value as by default is, I think, maybe what drew attention to Niki Ashton here.
Yeah, I think there's two things that really stand out to me here. The first is, in all of my years advising party leaders and ministers, I don't think there was ever one instance where my advice was to answer the question with, well, the rules said it was fine, therefore it's okay. Like it's really, really.
So you didn't work for David Dingwall, is what you're telling me. Yeah.
Say that I did, David. Or former Minister Oda. But all of that notwithstanding, I do think it's important to acknowledge that part of the reason that price tag is as high as it is because of the very remote community that Niki Ashton represents. It's very expensive to get out of northern Manitoba to Ottawa or to anywhere else in the country. So that's part of why the price tag looks the way it does. And I think also part of the reason that she does choose to work remotely as a parliamentarian, you talk to some of these MPs who represent regions like that, or let's say Yukon or Northwest Territory, even parts of northern British Columbia. When the House rises on a Friday, they sometimes don't get home because of flight schedules until the next morning. They have one day to spend in their community. And then on Sunday morning, they've got to go back to the airport and get back on another plane to be back in Ottawa for Monday. So it can be brutal. There are absolutely merits to a hybrid parliament, particularly insofar as it makes parliamentary work accessible to people with young families, which Niki Ashton is one of those people. So we don't want to lose that. And I think that just to sort of put a pin in all of this, I'd say it is incumbent upon the people who are in Parliament right now to use hybrid Parliament judiciously and not abuse that process in order to make sure that there continues to be trust in that system for the future.
So, Andrew, you suggested that they kind of might need to clean this up, right? When Jagmeet Singh was asked about this today, he kind of pointed to the existence of the rules as written and its compliance with that. What do you think the leader of the NDP should do here? I mean, do they need to insist she's in the House of Commons more often so this sort of thing is less of an issue, or just make her knock off this kind of travel? What do you think?
It's a good question. I know we're talking a lot about the hybrid parliament. I don't know that the issue would have been any different if she had been a regular attendee in the parliament in person. I mean, the question is this expense? And I appreciate everything Carlene's saying. Anybody who's traveled in the north knows how expensive it is and the distances. The question is, was this trip on its own justifiable? And I'm not sure that the defense that's been given matches up with that. So they are going to have to, I think that the NDP is going to have to figure out how to respond to that. To me, the question of whether she normally attends Parliament or doesn't is a bit of an odd one. It doesn't matter. The question would be, if she still did, would this have been a justifiable expense?
Okay, Emily, I give you the last word.
Two issues here in terms of how it's coming across. First, most of us don't write off our Christmas family vacation as a work expense, and so I think that's where the crux is, regardless of the numbers involved. And second, once again, if you really do care about official languages, and you have an MP who's responsible for that saying that they're doing a Quebec trip to meet with people and they haven't actually met with people, that's an issue if you care about the file, because that means that there isn't going to be a second Quebec trip for her to get briefed by the people locally about that, because that trip is supposedly already done. And so beyond the money, I insist that is actually an issue, and I'm curious to know who she actually met with.
In my experience, usually when an MP meets with a group of stakeholders, there's a picture of it somewhere on a social media somewhere. It's announced because that's a part of the game, and there's nothing there on this one. So who knows? We'll see if we get that list. I want to thank you all, Carlene Verheyen, Gary Keller, Andrew Thompson, and Emily Nicola. Thanks so much.